Let's just spend a few minutes to start with, just settling into our spaciousness. Just allow yourself to be that space, not really physical space, but it's that openness, that receptivity to allow whatever may be happening where you are. So you can just take note of maybe the physical surroundings in the room or wherever you are. Sense of sitting. Take note of the body's capacity to breathe. And just sense into just that capacity, just that spaciousness, just that openness. Receives, recognizes, it's aware of those perceptions, sensations. Without trying to change them in any way, without trying to judge them, without trying to breathe in a special way, in a spiritual way. Just allow the breath to happen however it is happening. Allow it just to be natural without trying to make it natural. Right? Just allow it to be as it is. We can do the same with any internal happenings, any feelings, any emotions, any discomforts, any thoughts. Again, without needing to change them at all, just allow them to be as they are and notice. Just notice what's happening. And there's no need to invent or look from the perspective of me that's noticing, right? We can just be aware that that capacity to notice, to take note of, to observe, doesn't require creating a witness or an observer or me that's doing the observing or me that's trying to do it right or wrong. No, just notice that it's already happening. That there's something that is aware of whatever thought may be happening. There's something that's already aware without us even trying, that notices whatever sensations may be happening in the body. Notice any feelings, emotions, as well as perceptions about what is in the room where you are or out the window. And just relax into that sense of just being the openness, the capacity to receive all of that without having to do anything, without having to change anything, without having to improve anything, without having to fix anything. And just set aside all our tendencies that we may have to do something. And we're not trying to change anything or improve something or reach some other state. Still alive, still present. What does that feel like? What does it feel like when we're not trying to make something else happen? When we're not grasping or rejecting whatever is happening now, just allowing it to be. We may like it, we may not like it. That's not actually that important. And we can notice and allow those likes and dislikes to be as they are without having to change those either. Just notice that, okay, this is how this particular body mind has been conditioned to like this better than that. It's okay. And when we allow everything to be as it is, we sort of step out of the managerial role. And there's an opportunity to see what remains. And we're not trying to change what is. Our doing is out of a job. And we're just left with being, right? Still here, still alive, still present, still with the same innate capacity to notice whatever does arise. We can just rest more and more into that space, not really a physical space, but just that sense of spaciousness that allows all of that to be. Not trying to fit it into a certain shape, certain size, big enough to allow all of that, whatever, memories, hopes, dreams, fears, worries, joys, big enough to allow all of that. And perhaps we can notice that we didn't attain anything that wasn't already present. And perhaps we just set aside a few things and noticed what was left when we weren't trying to make something else happen, like find peace or get enlightened We might find there's an opportunity to just see what's already present before we go looking for it. Okay, everybody good? So I thought to talk tonight about the divided mind and no mind. We're probably all familiar with the divided mind, maybe not with that term, but we're certainly have become familiar over the course of a lifetime with that divisiveness within the mind where um, we think that we should do this and we don't do it, or we think that we shouldn't do it and we do it anyway, or we think that we should love ourselves, but then we're hypercritical about ourselves when we feel like we haven't lived up to our own standards. Or we seek peace out in the world, but refuse to allow it in ourselves. Or we want to lose weight and we overeat. There's all kinds of things that where the mind wants one thing and does something else, just two conflicting thoughts, two conflicting movements. And we have that divisiveness happening within our own head. And it's such a part of our lives where we go through and try to figure out what's best, what I want, what I don't want, and how to make all that happen. And we can become puzzled by, sort of this body mind's unruliness, the unwillingness of this contraption to, follow orders, do what we want it to do, act like we want it to act, not embarrass us, you know, you know, step out into the world without fear. Lots of things that we can, really want this body mind to do, and then yet somehow it doesn't do it. And we can come up with sort of categories to explain why this is true. We can talk about the conscious self and the unconscious self. We can talk about, adult child personalities within the same body mind. We can talk about our higher and lower self. We can talk about ego and superego. Okay, great. We can try to explain those different movements within us. But the sense of it is that there can be, just the wonderment of like, well, who's in charge here? Like, I know that I want to do this, but yet when it comes down to actually doing it, I don't, or I do something else, or not as well as I'd hoped, or there's not quite a unified movement. And so we try to deal with that situation. We try to manage it somehow. And maybe you've tried sort of exerting more control, taking charge of our life, more self-esteem, more stickers on our bathroom window. To sort of motivate ourselves, sort of push ourselves more in a direction that we should go. But the only reason that we do that is if there's the other side of it is the resistance, right? If there's no resistance, why all the effort? So it's really both the effort and the resistance both happening. So the question is, why? When we try to manage that, maybe we try to gain more control just by sheer physical will. Or maybe we just sort of give in to our inclinations and just do whatever the body mind tells us to do. Or maybe we negotiate with ourselves, saying, well, I'll have that extra serving of dessert tonight, but tomorrow, I'll eat more broccoli, or I'll push myself this week to work harder, beyond my what I'd really like to do in terms of effort. But I'll make up for it by promising my body that I'll go on vacation next summer, to some beautiful place and make it all worthwhile. So we can negotiate with ourselves. I'll give up this form of addiction if I get something else in return. So that we can also try that strategy. But at the end of the day, we can begin to wonder, like, well, what is this mind that I seem to be doing battle with, or sort of trying to manage or negotiate with all the time? What is that? Where does where's this sense of divisiveness housed? And we can sort of blame our mind somehow. Well, my personal will is not quite up to the challenge today, or maybe I'm just flawed as a person, as a personality. I just don't have it in me to sort of take charge of my life. So you can go to a self-help course and build up your self-esteem, and then go back out into the fray and see how you manage. But what is all this? Is that the entirety of life? Sort of sort of managing these different thoughts in our mind, these different thought streams, these different motivations, trying to work all that out, trying to keep a sense of relative peace and within the privacy of my own mind. Is that it? Is that what we're alive for? And what I'd suggest, we're talking about a divided mind, right? Division it within our mind. But we're not actually talking about, a physical, a division physically or psychologically or neurologically. We're not talking about that kind of divisiveness. What we're really talking about is one thought opposing another thought. And each thought sort of vying for our attention, vying to get us to go in this direction or get us to go in this direction. But, at the end of the day, there's just thoughts arising. We give them power by believing them, believing that there are thoughts, feeling responsible for all the thoughts that go through our mind, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm the kind of person that would think that thought. But the only thing that we can know for sure is that thoughts arise. One thought, another thought. Not always, but fairly often they're in different directions. So we can feel pulled this way or that way, do something for immediate pleasure or postpone our pleasure in hopes of some future reward. I'll work hard for 40 years, but then I'll retire, whatever our strategy is. But what we can be sure of is that thoughts arise, and we notice those thoughts. The presumption is that there must be a mind that thinks those thoughts. That's the presumption. Seems logical, right? Thoughts happen. There must be something responsible for thinking those thoughts, namely me, my mind. That's what's doing it. I mean, it's a fairly, I mean, it's what everybody, almost everybody thinks that, yeah, it's my mind, my brain that's thinking these thoughts. It's me. That's what's doing it. I'm quite sure of it. The only problem is that when we actually go looking for this mind, we never find it. We can look for a long, long time. We never find it. It's just a construct. It's just an idea. There's thought. Here's the logical assumption. There's thought happening. That's true. Thought happening. Therefore, there must be a thinker of that thought. That's the part that's not true. And don't just believe it because someone said so. Um, Seek your heart out, trying to find the thinker of that thought. Try to find the mind in which thoughts happen. And what we find is thoughts, certainly, thoughts, perceptions, sensations, experiences, but not mind. Mind is an idea, a construct, something that we can mentally formulate to explain the phenomena called thinking. When the real proof is when we go looking for that mind as intently as we possibly can, we don't find it. Somebody once, I guess, complained to Trungpa Rinpoche that he was experiencing a busy mind, and Trungpa said, "Show it to me, and I'll stomp it out right here and now." I mean, that's the problem. There can be thoughts happening rapidly. They can be sort of chaotic thoughts, but the word busy mind is a concept. It's sort of an umbrella concept that we use to describe rapid thoughts that are sort of confusing, chaotic, right? So we say, I have a busy mind. But the mind can't be found. All that can be found is thoughts, one after another. And one of the benefits of meditation is that we get a good opportunity to watch that sort of endless freight train of thoughts, one after another, in a linear fashion, appearing. It's actually probably the most important benefit of meditation, to see the nature of thought, the nature of thinking. And one of the things that we can notice is that we can't control that thought stream. We can if we're doing something that we're engaged in, maybe something at work that requires sort of logical thinking. We can stay on track for a long period of time. But what I'm talking about is those periods of time. The other 90% where we don't really have anything that we really need to think about, and yet the mind rambles on, often, almost always, well, always about either the past or the future, neither of which are happening at the moment. But that's what we tend to replay over and over again in our minds, just that thought stream. So that's really one of the benefits of meditation, is to see that um, sort of repetitiveness of that whole mental thought stream, seeing thoughts that we've run through our heads hundreds, thousands of times. And that's, that's the thinking that happens. The presumption is, if there's thinking happening, there must be a thinker. That's what's not true. It's also what creates the self, the sense of self. You know, just the thought happening in itself, if we don't claim credit for it, credit or blame for it, it's just, you know, the next freight car passing. You know, it's only when we tell ourselves, believe that it is my thought. You know, I take credit for the good ones and blame for the bad ones. And hope nobody's able to listen to all of those other ones. All those other sort of crude, mean, judgmental, egotistical thoughts, all those. So this idea of mind being a idea, a construct, is really held together by this self-referencing thoughts that, whether we speak them in our head or not, are based on the presumption that it's me doing this thinking. Now, if it's just thoughts, it's just one thought, another thought, another thought. Sometimes they're in opposition, and that's what it feels like. But the sense of, well, there's no thinker, then it can, well, first of all, it can be surprising to find that out. Very surprising. It can even be disturbing. It can even be frightening, right? What do you mean there's no one home? There's no one in charge. You know, that'd be catastrophic, you know, if I believed that, right? But the reality is, it doesn't matter what we believe. What is important is what's true. And the reality, we can look and look and look, and we can look for the rest of our lives intently. Many people have, and no one has ever found this thing we call mind. In Buddhism, they talk about three marks of existence, three basic fundamentals of existence, characteristics of all existence. One is impermanence, right? Everything's always changing. Well, this is sort of in your face obvious, right? Everything is always changing. Everything in the world of form has a certain lifespan, comes and goes, is here for a while, constantly changing. This is impermanence, right? The second mark of existence, according to Buddhist theory, is that life has a sense of unsatisfactoriness. Doesn't mean that some really enjoyable things don't happen. They do. We all know that. It's not just one awful thing after another. But taken as a whole, life is challenging, right? Life isn't, just a cakewalk. Um, there are many things that are challenging that happen throughout our life, and then there's old age, sickness, and death to look forward to. So the sense of unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, sense of so it's often translated as suffering, but life isn't always abject suffering. But there is this sense of something's doesn't feel quite fulfilled, quite complete. There's that sense about life until there's not at some point. So we have impermanence, we have unsatisfactoriness, and the third leg of that stool, the third mark of existence, is no self. Right? Most people don't have a problem acknowledging impermanence and even unsatisfactoriness. They can say, yeah, I guess that's mostly true. But then we come to no self, and the way most people deal with that one is just ignore it. Right? Two legs on a stool is good enough. But this sense of no self is what we're talking about in terms of no mind. They're both actually the same thing. Without um, this these self-referential thoughts about me being the one thinking, me is the one that's doing whatever it is that I'm doing. Without those kind of um, self-referential thoughts, whether we think in those particular terms or just assume, yeah, it's me doing whatever it is that I do. Um, in the absence of those, it's just peace, right? We can call it no self, right? Not viewing this as separate from, well, everything else. And no self, no mind, is the same thing, right? Um, and no mind doesn't mean the absence of thinking, right? It's not like we'll suddenly lose our capacity to think. Thinking can happen, but the difference is there's not an identification with those thoughts. Thoughts may still be arising, and we can notice if, when we meditate, is that thoughts will happen whether we want them to or not. And it's actually through, not being disturbed by the mind doing its thing and just allowing it to be, that those thoughts eventually settle down. Whether they ultimately cease, it's of no consequence, actually. It's just that we don't park our identity in those thoughts. They may still happen. We can see them as things that happen that aren't actually under our control. If you could control your thoughts, you could just tell them to stop anytime you want. So we can just allow thoughts to arise as they may, but just without the sense of claiming ownership, claiming that they're my thoughts. That's who I am. I am defined by my thoughts. It's just not true. Thoughts happen. What is important is that noticing that there's something that is aware of the thoughts. That's what's important. That capacity. That capacity that we call awareness or consciousness. Consciousness or awareness, it's the same as no mind. It's not something that we attain as a particularly high state. It's just a recognition that that awareness is um, not subject to thought. It's what's aware of thought. Thought is that which appears within the field of awareness, just like the chair does, just like the tree does, just like my hands do when I look at them. They're appearances that are present within this field of awareness, right? But the field of awareness itself is not defined by thought. It's what's already happening for all of us. It's not an attainment, but there can be fear around that, like, well, if there wasn't anybody in charge, namely my mind, what would happen? How would I live? It's what's already happening. We're just talking about reality. We're not talking about philosophy at all. And it's easily confirmable if we choose to look. If we choose to look, we can see that the one thing, the only thing that we can ever be completely certain of is that consciousness exists, awareness exists, and everything else is an appearance within it. Everything else, thoughts, feelings, sensations, body aches, this body, that tree, everything is an appearance within awareness. That is our direct experience. None of us have ever experienced anything outside of our consciousness, and we never will. This isn't to in any way diminish the beauty of that appearance. The entirety of creation is visible within awareness. Beautiful, wonderful. But it's the awareness that is essential. In deep meditation, awareness can remain and everything else can be absent, no thought, forget all about the body, world disappears, and awareness remains. But the opposite is not possible. It's not possible to have the world without awareness. There'd be no one, you wouldn't know whether the world existed or didn't. So it's just the appearance of everything within awareness that we can know firsthand. But this goes against what we've all been taught, or what we've all assumed growing up in this culture. What we've grown up with, and what most people believe, including most scientists believe, that this consciousness that we're talking about is generated by brain cells, right? And the assumption is that the brain, with billions, if not trillions, of connections, is complex enough that somehow, out of that electrochemical reactions and cellular activity, that somehow that wet mass that we call our brain produces consciousness. So somehow out of matter, out of the world of form, somehow The formless is created from that. That's the theory, right? Not provable, of course, never will be, because all we can ever know about the brain or anything can only be observed within the field of awareness. It's the field of awareness that is the ultimate subject, the knowingness that's present. So the idea that somehow matter can produce the one thing that is not of the world of form, namely awareness, um, is wildly speculative. So most people assume, but it's wildly speculative. It's sort of like the origin myths in religion, like some fanciful idea of how the universe was created. So we know that matter can change. We know that chemical reactions are possible. You can boil water and it goes from water to steam. We know we can burn wood and it turns into energy. We know that atomic bombs exist that can convert small masses of matter into enormous amounts of energy. So energy and matter are interchangeable. It's what Einstein told us 100 years ago. But matter to the formlessness of awareness, different dimension altogether. And the presumption that somehow our brain, the cellular matter in our brain, creates consciousness, sort of has it backwards, because the only thing that we can know with certainty is that consciousness exists. And it can be aware of these bodies, can be aware of the fact that brains exist, but that awareness, all of that knowing happens within awareness. The awareness is primary. And to presume that it's not, that it's somehow derivative from matter, is as backwards as seeing firefighters grouped at a burning building over and over again, and drawing the conclusion that firefighters cause fires. The correlation isn't proof of cause. There's also, since we can't say for certain how thoughts even arise within the brain, the assumption is that the brain generates that, but the other possibility is that the brain receives that. All we can say for certain is that thoughts arise, have a certain lifespan, they're not under our control, and we can take note of them. That's what we know. Right? So my suggestion is go with what we know with certainty, namely awareness exists, and allow the thoughts to be there. They don't define who you are. So all the effort to try to modify, manage, fight with, improve, fix this set of thoughts isn't actually necessary. It's all sort of fighting with windmills. The really essential thing is to recognize what we can know with certainty. Start there. actually both the start and the finish. Finish line is like an inch further than the start line. If we're going in, if we're moving at all, it's just recognizing what's already the case. So, we can come up with arguments why, um, this idea of no mind or just being, awareness or being the space in which everything happens, um, was just be dull. If we don't have an opinions and aren't trying to, argue with things and change things and make things better, life would be dull. But um, life is far from dull. Actually, what's dull is living our entire life um, believing that what we are is limited to the thoughts in our head, our pre-existing, our conditioned thoughts in our head. That's dull. What's much more alive is to recognize this immense vastness that this awareness is, and its capacity to um, receive, to be present for all things that arise. Much, much more liberating. There can be practices, like one of the practices in some traditions is to, try to be without preference, right? We can try to be without preference as a practice, or we can notice that this awareness is already without preference. Sort of like the mirror in your bathroom. When you walk into the bathroom in the morning, that mirror reflects whatever mood you're in. If you come in with a bad mood, it reflects that. Come in with a good mood, reflects that. It's not, the mirror's not actually trying to be without preference. It's actually its nature, right? It's just a reflection, pure reflection. Doesn't It's not holding out hope that you'll show up in a certain mood or you'll stay longer, or it's just present for whatever's happening. And in that sense, awareness is very much like that. Its nature is without preference. Our mind or conditioned body, sure. If you have a choice of 32 flavors of ice cream, you're gonna have a preference. You're not gonna stand in the store and say, well, actually I'm without preference, and no, you're gonna say, I don't know, chocolate, right? But the difference is that there's not a belief that chocolate's the right answer, right? Chocolate is actually better than any other flavor. It's not like we hold that so tightly. It's just like, yeah, there's a preference, okay. But if they're out of chocolate, that's okay too. It's not a big thing. It's not how we define what we are. And it's the same with, life circumstances. There'll be things that we'll enjoy in life. Of course, we'll prefer that. But when things that are more challenging show up, the question is, are we okay with that too? I mean, we have to like it or love it, but are we okay with it? Are we willing to experience it without resistance? So as we learn to step into our nature as this um, awareness, as a state of um, no mind, not identification with the thinking that's happening, but just step out of that into the presence that is there, that's witnessing, that's aware of whatever thinking is happening. As we step into that more and more, that our true self, our unborn nature, our Buddha nature, our big self, whatever you want to call it, or mind with a capital M, the unborn, whatever word appeals, we're all talking about the same thing. Different traditions, same realization. As we step into that more and more, it may take a certain degree of relaxation and trust to just allow that, sort of take the lead, like take the lead and dance of life. Let that awareness lead rather than the thinking mind, and to begin to trust that more and more. And as we do, there will be a greater and greater appreciation of the innate wisdom of that, far greater than our thinking, calculating, grasping mind.